Welcome to Midweek Musing for Wednesday the 1st of July. Yesterday I attended the National Parliamentary Prayer Breakfast, live streamed from the Houses of Parliament. A slightly strange title as there was no breakfast, but there was lots of prayer. We were welcomed by the Speaker of the House and then the Prime Minister, then the Leader of the Opposition. Maybe an indication that this is seen as important. The Prime Minister even thanked people for praying for him during his illness. There were powerful prayers from 5 MPs as they prayed for people in this country, as they prayed for the NHS and key workers, prayed for the government, for Parliament as a whole, for the world. A group of MPs combined to pray the Lord's Prayer as a medley. It was a powerful and encouraging time, and good to be part of it along with more than 3,000 other people from this country and around the world. The Bishop of Kensington, Graham Tomlin, shared some reflections on life through lockdown and the amazing contributions churches have made to so many around the country. He based part of his excellent message on Philippians 2 verses 3 to 11, and specifically the example of Jesus in humbling himself, coming into the world, putting the needs of others before his own. In those verses, Paul presents a stunning description of what Jesus was prepared to do, what he was prepared to endure, the burdens he was willing to carry, what he accomplished. And he also shows what God has done in response as he raised the risen Jesus to the highest place in heaven above everybody else, above everything else. The one who had humbled himself was exalted by God. And just before that description, Paul calls for a particular type of behaviour in the lives of the believers at Philippi and so on to us, pointing to the example of Jesus as the motive for living in that way. And in verses 3 and 4, we find these words: "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." Paul says there are some things that you should not do. Being selfish, being conceited, maybe with a false impression of ourselves and our own value. We shouldn't look out for just what is important to us. Paul also talks about some things that we should do. To be humble, to value others above ourselves, to think about what is important to others. I don't think Paul is calling on believers to think we are worse than other people, but to put their interests above our own. And as Graham Tomlin reflected on those verses in the context of what we've seen during this crisis, he made some very interesting observations. That even in the act of going along with the lockdown, agreeing for so long to shut ourselves in, we have forfeited our own individual freedoms to protect others, maybe to shield the most vulnerable in our society. Many people, he'd heard over 10 million, had volunteered in different ways. He recognised that one of the issues behind racism, which, as he acknowledged, is a big problem that needs to be addressed, was that it often involves a fear of those who look different to us, as opposed to valuing others above ourselves. He reminded us that people have been demonstrating the self-sacrificing behaviour that Paul called for as we follow the example of Jesus. But he also recognised that as lockdown restrictions are starting to ease, as things start to open up, Old behaviours are starting up again as people want to exercise more of their own personal freedoms, to go where they want, to spend time with the people they want to spend time with, to be free from all the restrictions we have put up with. And we have seen examples of that over the last week or so. And the question he asked was whether we, as individuals and as society, wanted that pendulum to swing back all the way, or whether we want to rebalance how we think about individual rights and responsibility towards others. He believes, and I agree with him, that we should not go back to the same level of individualism as before. What we've seen during lockdown and the blessings those different behaviours have brought to many, as well as the example of Jesus, they call for a different way of living. We cannot compel everyone in society to behave in a different way. Though I think maybe one of the things Graham Tomlin was doing in his address was speaking to Parliament and asking them to think about these things as they plan and as they legislate. But we can make choices for ourselves in how we choose to live as we start to come out the other side of this crisis. Here's some questions to think about. What great examples have you seen of people putting others first? Do you agree we shouldn't just go back to how things were? What changes in behaviour do you think would make the greatest difference? And how can we, as a church, demonstrate some of the principles Paul spoke about even more than before?